She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't flip the table or throw the glass or do any of the things a normal person might do when they realize, mid-bite, in front of 14 people, 8 months pregnant, that someone at the table is trying to kill them. She smiled, set her fork down, and said, "It's wonderful, Renata. You've really outdone yourself." Because Nora Callahan-Weston had spent 12 years as a federal investigator. She had sat across from men who had buried bodies. She had shared meals with people who would have had her killed without hesitation if they had known her real name. She knew how to smile at someone who wanted her dead. What she didn't know yet, what she would spend the next 48 hours uncovering, was that her mother-in-law had been doing this for 34 years, and that she wasn't the first. She was just the first one still alive to know it. Before we go any further, hit subscribe, give this video a like, and drop in the comments where you're watching from. I genuinely want to know how far these stories travel. Now, let's go back to that table. The gravy boat arrived in both hands. Slowly, deliberately, the way you carry something that matters, or something intended. "I made this one especially for you, sweetheart." Renata Weston set it down in front of Nora's plate with a soft, precise clink against the fine china. Her smile was warm. Her eyes were not. They never were. The dining room smelled of roasted rosemary, expensive candles, and the particular kind of wealth that doesn't need to announce itself. It simply is in the coffered ceilings and the heated marble floors and the oil portraits of 3 generations of Westons watching from the walls with identical blue eyes and identical expressions of mild disapproval. 14 people around the table. Snow falling outside the tall windows. A fire in a fireplace large enough to stand inside. And Nora, 8 months pregnant, running on 4 hours of sleep, still carrying the emotional residue of a federal case she'd closed 6 days ago, sitting in the middle of it all in a maternity dress that didn't fit right, smiling at a woman who had never once, in 5 years, asked her a single genuine question. She lifted the ladle. She poured. She took the smallest possible bite, the kind of bite you learn to take when you're never quite sure whether the person who prepared your food wants you to finish it. The taste hit her tongue like a memory she didn't want to have. Bitter, metallic, wrong in a way that didn't go through the brain at all. It went somewhere older, something animal, something that said, "Put it down. Something is in this." 7 years of field training activated before her conscious mind could catch up. She didn't flinch. She didn't pause. Her fork moved exactly as it should. Her expression didn't change. But her hand found her husband's under the table. 1 squeeze. 2. "I need to talk to you." "Now." Callum glanced at her, confused. She shook her head slightly. "Not here." Across the table, Renata Weston was watching her plate. Not warmly. Not with the pride of a grandmother-to-be watching a daughter-in-law she loved enjoy a special meal. With anticipation. The way you watch something you've been waiting a long time to see happen. "Excuse me," Nora said, her voice perfectly composed. "The baby's pressing on my bladder again." Soft laughter around the table. The comfortable laughter of people who have nowhere to be and nothing to worry about. "Of course, dear," Renata said. "Take your time. We'll save your plate. I'm sure you will." She walked down the hallway at a pace that said nothing was wrong. Her heels were quiet against the marble. The family portraits watched her pass, generation after generation of Westons. None of them her. None of them ever going to be her. She locked the bathroom door, counted to 3, listened for footsteps. Then she moved fast. Evidence bags in her purse. Not paranoia. Habit. The residue of a career built on the belief that you never know when something matters until it already does. She worked quickly, labeled the bag in black marker. November. Weston Estate. Gravy. Possible contaminant. Then she stood over the sink with both palms flat on cool porcelain and looked at herself in the gilded mirror. 8 months along. Shadows under her eyes. A face that had stared down worse things than this. Had it? She ran through what she knew. The taste had been beneath the herbs, beneath the garlic and thyme and the rosemary Renata always used too much of. Something sweet adjacent, turning metallic at the back of the palate. Something that didn't belong anywhere near food. She knew that taste. She had encountered it 4 years ago in a case that had nearly broken her. A poisoning so carefully administered that 2 hospitals had missed it entirely. She had been the one to push the toxicologist to run one more panel. She had been the one who refused to accept natural causes as a conclusion for a 43-year-old man in perfect health. She fixed her face in the mirror, straightened her dress, practiced a smile that reached her eyes, and walked back to the dining room. She didn't need another bite. She moved food around the plate with a skill she had learned in childhood. Push, separate, redistribute. The art of appearing to eat without eating, developed during dinners with a father whose moods made the table a minefield. Her father had been too drunk to notice. Renata noticed everything. "How is it, dear?" "The gravy." "Wonderful," Nora said. "You've really outdone yourself this year." The lie tasted worse than the poison. Renata's smile widened. Just slightly. Just enough to mean something if you were looking for it. And Nora was always looking. Callum drove home through the falling snow with the radio on low. Christmas music. Something nostalgic and warm. He reached for her hand across the center console. "You were quiet tonight." "Tired." She watched the orange streetlights streak past the window. "The case last week took a lot out of me. Mom noticed you didn't eat much." She counted every bite I didn't take. "Morning sickness," Nora said. "Still comes and goes." Callum nodded, satisfied. He had always been able to accept simple answers. One of the things she had loved about him in the beginning. No interrogation, no dramatics, no need to push past the surface. She understood now that it was also the thing that made him the most dangerous person in her life. A man who accepted simple answers never asks the ones that matter. She pressed her palm against her belly. The baby rolled, a slow, deliberate movement, an elbow or a knee pressing in her hand like a small fist of reassurance. "I'm going to protect you," she thought. "Whatever it takes." The evidence bag sat in her purse like a lit fuse. She didn't sleep. At 2 a.m, she was at the kitchen island with her laptop, the house dark around her, the only light the blue glow of the screen against her face. She typed carefully. Ethylene glycol, taste profile. Sweet initially, bitter aftertaste. Frequently masked in fatty or savory liquids. Often described as metallic at high concentrations. She read, causes renal failure within 72 hours. Frequently misdiagnosed as food poisoning, flu, or acute illness. By the time organ involvement is confirmed, intervention window is narrow. She typed again, slower this time. Ethylene glycol, fetal exposure. She read the first 3 results. Then she closed the laptop, pressed both palms flat on the cool counter. Breathed. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall read 3:22. Outside, a car moved slowly through the snow-covered street, headlights sweeping briefly across the kitchen ceiling and then gone. She sat in the dark for a very long time, thinking about what it means to be the only person in a room, in a house, in a marriage, in a life, who understands what's actually happening. She had felt that before, in a warehouse in Cincinnati, in a courtroom in Columbus, in 100 fluorescent-lit interview rooms. She had never felt it in her own kitchen. She went back to bed at 5. She didn't close her eyes once. The federal field office outside Briarfield was designed to be forgettable, gray concrete, flags snapping in the November wind, parking lot half empty the day after Thanksgiving. The kind of building you drive past every day without seeing. Nora drove there at 9 in the morning while Callum was still sleeping. She left no note. Priya Desai met her in the parking structure. Level 2, Section D, the camera shadow they had used for sensitive conversations for 7 years. The spot where Priya had told Nora she was leaving her husband and then hadn't and then finally did. Where Nora had first told Priya about the undercover assignment before anyone else knew. Ground made sacred by everything they'd said there that couldn't be said anywhere else. Priya looked at Nora's face and skipped the greeting entirely. Talk. I need the lab. Off the record. A long pause. Okay. That was the thing about Priya Desai. She had never once wasted words asking questions that were going to answer themselves. Dr. Warren Chun was running samples on a counterfeiting case with a thermos of cold coffee at his elbow and the expression of a man who had accepted that the holidays were theoretical for people in their line of work. He looked up when they walked in, registered Nora's condition, her expression, and the evidence bag she set in front of him. He asked one question. What am I looking for? Ethylene glycol. Possible combination compound. I need concentration levels and an origin assessment. He held the bag to the fluorescent light. Turn it once. This came from food? Thanksgiving dinner. His face did something she recognized. The specific expression of a scientist confronting a data point that has human weight behind it. For hours, he said. They sat in the break room with bad coffee from a pot that had been running since the previous morning. Vending machine crackers that tasted like cardboard. The fluorescent light overhead had a flicker in it that nobody had gotten around to fixing. Priya waited until they were alone. Tell me everything. Nora stared at her wedding ring. 3 carats. Princess cut. Callum had proposed at sunset on the coast of the Outer Banks, and she had cried, which she almost never did, and she had thought, this is it. The real thing. The life I didn't know I was building toward. She made me gravy, Nora said. Special, just for me. Said it was my favorite. She paused. She has never once in 5 years asked what I like, what I want, what I prefer. Not once. Priya's eyes didn't move. She watched me eat it like she was counting every bite. Not with warmth. With something else. Nora set down the coffee. I know the taste, Priya. I spent 3 weeks explaining the ethylene glycol profile to a DA who kept calling it a specialized area. I know exactly what it tastes like when it's masked in fat-based liquid. The break room was very quiet. You're telling me your mother-in-law tried to poison you at Thanksgiving dinner. I'm telling you I tasted something wrong. And I need the lab to tell me what. Priya reached across the table. Squeeze her hand once. Firm. For hours, she said. The call came at 2:22 in the afternoon. Nora was in her car in the parking structure with the engine running, watching snow drift past the concrete pillars in slow diagonal lines. Ethylene glycol, Warren said. No preambid. I ran it 3 times. Different methodology each pass. Same result. A pause. The concentration in this sample, based on the serving volume you described. We're looking at a calculated dose, Nora. Someone measured this. This was not contamination. The parking structure seemed to tilt very slightly. The baby, she said. The pause before he answered told her everything. In a late-term pregnancy, fetal exposure precedes maternal organ involvement. I'm looking at a timeline that would put miscarriage onset within 36 to 48 hours. Followed by maternal renal complications in the next 24 to 72. She didn't speak. Nora, who gave you the sample? She watched the snow fall. The small, ordinary, indifferent snow of a regular November afternoon in Ohio, falling on a parking structure outside a federal building while a toxicologist told her that someone had tried to kill her and her unborn child at a holiday dinner. My family, she said. She called Callum at 3 o'clock. Hey. Warm and easy. The voice of a man who had spent the afternoon watching football and didn't know his world was an hour from ending. How are you feeling? You were gone when I woke up. I need to talk to you tonight. In person. It's important. A pause. The warmth cooled. Is it the baby? Is something? The baby is fine. Just come home. Don't go to your mother's tonight. She kept her voice even with both hands, the way you hold something that could break. Please. She called about leftovers. She made that turkey soup. Callum. Silence. Just come home. He arrived at 7:40. Sandy hair, slightly windblown. Weekend clothes. Cheeks pink from the cold. He looked like himself. The man she had fallen in love with at a charity auction over a contested glass of Pinot. The man who had made her laugh for the first time in 2 years. The man she had built 5 years around. She had left the living room lights low. The folder sat on a coffee table. He read it standing up, still in his coat, the color leaving his face in stages. The way light leaves a room when the sun goes down, room by room, slowly, and then completely. There has to be an explanation. His voice was somewhere between desperate and certain. Kitchen equipment. Something in the pipes. A contaminated ingredient. Ethylene glycol doesn't appear in food through pipes. My mother would not. I watch her watch my plate. Nora's voice was the voice she used in interrogations. She hated that she needed it here. In her own living room. With her own husband. Not with warmth. With anticipation. I spent 4 years in behavioral analysis, Callum. I know the difference. He stood. Paced. Both hands through his hair. The stressed gesture she had cataloged over 5 years of loving him. "I know her," he said. "I've known her my entire life. She's controlling, she's difficult, she doesn't always. The most dangerous people always have someone who describes them exactly like that." She stood to meet him. Difficult. Doesn't express herself well. But not capable. The silence between them had a shape. A weight. Something that hadn't been there before and couldn't be taken back. "I need to call her," he said. "I need to hear her side." And Nora felt something shift in her chest. Not breaking, something more final than breaking. Like a decision that had been waiting to be made, finally settling into place. "Fine," she said. "Call her." Renata answered on the second ring. Her voice was everything Nora expected. Unhurried. Warm. A woman who had received difficult calls before and knew exactly how to answer them. The conversation moved in the direction a skilled person steers it, toward concern, toward wounded dignity, toward the language of love. "Special gravy? Darling, I call that wonderful caterer. I want to do something thoughtful for Nora. I know I'm not always good at showing it, but I love her. She's carrying my grandchild." Callum's shoulders visibly softened. Nora watched it happen from across the room, the way you watch an accident you can't stop. When Callum mentioned the lab results, Renata paused. One beat. Two. Then her voice shifted, not to panic, not to guilt, to gentle, patient concern. "Oh, sweetheart, you know how labs can be. Human error. Mislabeled samples. Nora is under such enormous stress. The pregnancy, those terrible cases she works on. I've seen it before in strong women. The mind looks for threats because it's been trained to. I'm worried about her, Callum. I think she needs rest. I think she needs support, not suspicion." Callum nodded. He actually nodded. "I want to stop here and ask you something. Have you ever watched someone you love choose a comfortable story over a hard truth? Because this moment, right here, is where the story really begins. Drop it in the comments. I'll read every single one." The word came out carefully. Not angry. Almost gentle. "Maybe you're being a little paranoid, Viv." The word landed in the room like something thrown through glass. Paranoid. The word her mother had heard for 11 years before she finally left. The word used against Nora twice in her career when she saw things people didn't want her to see. The word that meant, your perception is the problem, not the reality. "That word," she said quietly. "I didn't mean. I have lab results, Callum. Chemistry does not have a hormonal imbalance." He looked at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before, and she had seen most of them by now. Doubt, not in his mother. In her. She picked up the lab report, held it for a moment, sat back down. "I need you to leave tonight," she said. "Nora, I need you to go somewhere else and think about what you believe. Because I can't be in this house with you right now and still be who I need to be." He left 2 hours later with a bag. She stood at the window and watched the headlights sweep across the living room wall and then disappear. She did not cry. She went to the kitchen island and opened her laptop. And she went to work. Renata Claire Weston. Born Renata Claire Ashby. Meridian Hills, Ohio. April 1961. Married Douglas Weston. 1982. She was 21. He was 46. Nora made a note and kept reading. Douglas Weston died in December 1989. Kidney failure. Natural causes. No autopsy. He was 44 years old. No family history of renal disease. No documented risk factors. A man described in 3 separate obituaries as vigorous, competitive, and relentlessly healthy. A man who sailed and played tennis and hadn't missed a day of work in 2 decades. Dead in 3 weeks of unexplained organ failure. The same month his attorney had been drafting revisions to the Weston Family Trust. Revisions that, after his death, were never finalized. Nora set her coffee down. She kept going. Gerald Ashby, Renata's uncle by marriage. Died 2001. Organ failure, natural causes. Age 51. 2 months before his death, he had voted to block a proposed capital reallocation within the Weston Foundation. A reallocation that would have given Renata, as chair, significant new financial authority. After he died, the reallocation passed unanimously. Patricia Morse, family friend, Weston Foundation board member, died 2009, sudden illness, age 47. 6 weeks before she died, She had submitted a formal written inquiry about discrepancies in the foundation's charitable disbursements under Renata's leadership. The inquiry was closed following her death. Insufficient documentation, the record said. Thomas Haverland, Weston family attorney, retired. Died, 2015. Complications from renal failure. Age 60. According to a paralegal Nora found through a professional licensing database, a woman who had retired to Scottsdale and answered the phone on the third ring with the wariness of someone who had been waiting for it. Haverland had been preparing documentation to challenge Renata's control of the estate's secondary trust. He died before the documentation was filed. For people, for deaths, for clear lines connecting cause and consequence. Renata's opposition removed, Renata's position strengthened, Renata's control expanded, and not a single investigation. Not a single autopsy. Not a single moment when someone had looked closely enough. Nora sat in her dark kitchen at 4 a.m. with the blue light of the laptop on her face and understood. With the cold, complete clarity she had felt in exactly 3 other moments of her career, that she was looking at something real. Something that had been hiding in plain sight for 34 years. And that she was not the first target. She was just the first one still alive who knew what she was looking for. She called Priya at 7. I need you to pull cold cases. Everything connected to the Weston family for the last 40 years. Deaths, hospitalizations, people who left the family's employ quietly. People who got close to the family and then disappeared. A long silence. How many deaths are we talking about? 4 confirmed so far. Probably more. The sound of Priya Desai absorbing something she didn't want to absorb. Send me everything you have. Then, quieter, Nora, be careful. I know, not professionally. You, be careful. One more name. She had heard it 3 times at family dinners over 5 years. Always briefly, always with a particular kind of silence that followed, the silence that falls around things people have decided not to discuss. Serena Park, Callum's fiancée before Nora. Engaged in 2016. Ended the engagement 8 months in. Moved to Portland. Changed her number. Nora found a hospitalization record. Not sealed, just overlooked like most things that inconvenient people experience. Serena Park had been admitted to Cascade Valley Medical in September 2016. Severe, unexplained gastrointestinal distress. Neurological symptoms. 3-day inpatient admission with no definitive diagnosis on discharge. 1 month before she ended her engagement. 1 month after attending her first extended Weston family holiday weekend. The knock at the door came on a Thursday afternoon. Nora had been on administrative leave for 6 days by then. Her supervisor, Director Okafor, had called her in on the Monday after she began pulling files, calm, heavy-voiced, delivering a verdict he clearly didn't enjoy. A formal complaint had been filed. Misuse of federal resources. Unauthorized investigation. Harassment of private citizens. Renata Weston had moved fast. Of course she had. Nora had listened to the charges with her hands folded in her lap and her face still. I have to put you on administrative leave pending review. I understand. If you're right, I am right. Then the evidence will show it. A pause. But, Nora, you're 8 months pregnant. You're doing this alone from the inside. I need you to let the process. The process hasn't looked at this family in 34 years. He had no answer for that. So she was home when the knock came. She looked through the peephole. Maya Weston Park stood on her porch. Callum's sister-in-law, wife of the older brother, Garrett, a woman who had sat at 12 family dinners with Nora over 5 years and said almost nothing. Not because she was shallow, Nora had always sensed, but because she had learned that it was safer. The woman on her porch looked different, like someone who had been building courage for a long time and had finally arrived at the door it had been meant for. Nora opened it. Can I come in? Maya sat at the kitchen table with a mug of chamomile tea she held without drinking. The steam rose and curled between them. She didn't speak for almost 2 full minutes. Nora waited. I believe you, Maya said. The kitchen was very quiet. About Renata, the poison, all of it. Her voice was steady in the way of someone who has rehearsed this for a long time without knowing who they were rehearsing for. I believe you because she did it to me too. The story came out slowly. Maya had been pregnant in 2020. 11 weeks along. Garrett had been thrilled. Renata had been measured, supportive in the language, precise in her concerns. Too soon. His career. The timing. Are you sure you're ready? The comments had been relentless. And then Maya had started getting sick. I thought it was the pregnancy, she said. Her voice was flat the way grief goes flat after long enough. Worse than normal. The fatigue, the nausea, the dizziness. My doctor wasn't alarmed at first. She looked down at her hands. At 13 weeks, I lost the pregnancy. Nora didn't speak. The doctors had no explanation. Everything had been perfect at 12 weeks. And then, she stopped. Breathed. 2 weeks before I miscarried, Renata had started bringing me smoothies. A prenatal blend from her nutritionist, she said. She wanted to take care of me. The kitchen air had a quality to it now. Dense. 3 days after the miscarriage, I was cleaning out the refrigerator. The way you do when something terrible happens and you can't be still. And I found one of the containers. There was residue at the bottom. Maya's jaw tightened. It smelled wrong. Sweet. Chemical. Wrong. She reached in her bag, set a sealed container on the table between them. I've been carrying this for 4 years, she said, telling myself I was grieving, that I was looking for something to blame, that no one would believe me. She looked up. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was not. I've been waiting for someone to do what you're doing. I just didn't have the courage to start myself. This is the moment I keep coming back to, the moment when someone who has been alone in something terrible realizes they were never actually alone. That someone else saw it too, that they weren't crazy. If that's ever been you, this comment section is yours right now. They talked for 4 hours. Maya had more than the container. A journal, 18 months of notes, the names of 2 former household employees who had left quietly after becoming ill, a conversation she had overheard between Renata and Garrett that she had never let herself fully examine until now. When Maya finally left, the sun had gone down. Nora sat alone at the kitchen table with the evidence in front of her and understood that the case had just changed. It was no longer a theory. It was a pattern with witnesses. It was real, documented, and growing. She opened her laptop. Tell me every name you remember, she had said to Maya. And Maya had produced a list. Priya called on a Friday morning. Her voice had the texture it got when she had been awake since before dawn and had seen something she couldn't unsee. I found a witness statement, filed with the Meridian Hills Police Department in December of 1989, and then quietly transferred to an archive subfolder that should have been inactive. A pause. Nora, someone buried this. What does it say? It's heavily redacted, but the source is a woman named Celia Marchand. She was the Weston family housekeeper from 1984 to 1990. She gave this statement 10 days after Douglas Weston died. Is she alive? 81. Assisted living in Clearwater, Florida. Another pause, and Nora could hear the smile underneath the next sentence. The facility notes describe her as, and I'm quoting, extraordinarily sharp. Remembers everything. Still reads 2 newspapers a day. Nora was already on her feet. Set up the call. Celia Marchand appeared on screen like someone who had been expecting this conversation for 3 decades and had simply been waiting for the dial to ring. White hair pinned neatly. Guide framid glasses. A yellow cardigan. Behind her, a small, tidy apartment full of photographs. She looked at Nora's face on the screen for a long moment. You're the one who married the younger boy, she said. Yes, ma'am. And she tried to do it to you. Not a question. I need to know what you saw, Nora said. Celia folded her hands in her lap, composed herself, the gesture of someone carrying something they have never put down. I came in early, she said. Morning of November 12th, 1989. Before 6. I had forgotten my reading glasses the night before. Her voice was clear and precise. I let myself in through the service entrance. I didn't want to wake the household. What did you see? Mrs. Weston, in the kitchen, still in her robe, hair down. I had never once seen her less than perfectly groomed before that morning. Celia paused. She had a small bottle in her hand. Brown glass. No label. She was measuring something from it into the coffee carafe. Carefully, the way you measure medication. Very precise. Very deliberate. The color of the liquid? Greenish. Slightly viscous. And when I stepped back through the service door, I caught the smell for just a moment. Celia looked directly into the camera. Sweet. Chemical. The kind of thing that has no business in a kitchen. Nora's throat was tight. Mr. Douglas started getting ill within the week, Celia continued. Confusion. Weakness. His kidneys failing. The doctors called it unexplained. A tragedy. A healthy man. She exhaled. I gave a statement to the police. Told them exactly what I've just told you. The detective who took it retired 2 months later on a full pension. The case was closed. Her voice was even, but not without grief. And Mrs. Renata, very quietly, very politely, informed me that the family would be reducing household staff. Budget concerns, she said. But she looked at me when she said it. She looked right into my eyes. She knew you had talked. She knew. And she wanted me to know that she knew. Celia paused. A letter arrived the following month from a law firm, reminding me of my confidentiality agreement, reminding me that spreading false accusations had legal consequences, reminding me that the Weston family had very good lawyers. So you stayed quiet. I was 61. I had a granddaughter I was helping raise. I had nothing. Her jaw tightened. But I did not forget. She reached off screen, came back with a leather journal, old and swollen with decades of editions, newspaper clippings visible at the edges, handwritten notes on every page. I started this after the funeral, she said. Every name, every death, every time I read something about the Weston family and thought about what I knew. She held it up to the camera. Page after page after page. A meticulous, private record of 34 years of watching and waiting and being powerless to stop something she knew was real. I knew someday someone would need this. She looked into the camera. Her eyes were wet. I prayed for it. Every night. I prayed for someone strong enough and stubborn enough and close enough to make it stop. A pause. I just didn't imagine she'd be 8 months pregnant when she finally showed up. Despite everything. Despite all of it. Nora almost smiled. Would you testify? Celia Marchand didn't hesitate for a single second. I've been waiting 34 years to testify. You tell me when and where. The warrant was signed on December 22nd. 3 confirmed homicides. 2 attempted murders. A witness statement from 1989. Toxicology reports from 3 exhumed bodies. Financial records establishing motive for each death. A supplemental sample from Maya Weston Park's 2020 pregnancy. And a pattern of suspicious activity spanning 3.5 decades. Director Okafor had called Nora into his office on a Monday morning, 11 days after she'd submitted the full case file, and slid the warrant across his desk with the expression of a man who had seen a great deal and was still surprised by this particular thing. The arrest is set for December 24th, he said. She's hosting the Foundation's annual holiday gala at the estate. 50 guests. Nora looked at him. Best time to move is when she's surrounded by everyone who believes in her, so they can all see exactly who she is. She dressed carefully on Christmas Eve. Dark coat. Her badge clipped to her belt. Hair back in the way she wore it when things were official. Callum had called 4 times in the past 2 weeks. She had let every call go to voicemail. She had listened to each message once. His voice cycling through stages. Confusion, grief, the slow and terrible emergence of a man beginning to understand that the world he grew up in had been a performance, and that the woman who had directed had been the last person he would ever have suspected. She didn't know yet what she would say to him. She knew it would be honest. She knew it would be kind. She knew it would be the end of something. Tonight had its own weight to carry first. The Weston estate glowed from a quarter-mile away. Fairy lights winding through every tree lining the circular drive. The tall windows lit from within, amber, gold, the warm blur of 100 candles. Valets moving in the cold air, their breath rising in small clouds. Black cars filling the circular driveway with the quiet confidence of people who have never once had to worry about what comes next. Music drifting through the stone facade. Something classical, elegant. Nora stood at the perimeter with Priya beside her, and 5 agents positioned around the grounds. And she looked at the house she had first walked into 5 years ago as a new wife trying to belong, and she thought about every dinner she had sat through at that table, every comment she had absorbed, every smile she had returned that wasn't meant. She pressed her palm against her belly. The baby moved. 8.5 months. 2 more weeks. Ready? Priya asked. I've been ready since Thanksgiving, she said. The front doors opened on a warmth. Light, music, the clink of champagne, and the murmur of 50 people who believed the world was exactly what it appeared to be. 50 faces turned. The music didn't stop immediately. So for one suspended, surreal moment, a string quartet kept playing while 6 federal agents walked into the room, and every person present understood, in sequence, what they were seeing. Nora Weston stood near the fireplace. Red velvet dress. Silver hair perfect. Diamonds at her throat. A champagne flute held with the practiced ease of a woman who had hosted this party for 20 years and expected to host it for 20 more. She saw Nora. Something moved across her face. Not fear. Not guilt. Disbelief. The specific disbelief of someone confronting an impossibility they should have anticipated. The champagne flute slipped. Crystal and gold across white marble. And Nora's voice carried clearly through the silent room. Nora Callahan-Weston. She read the charges slowly. Murder in the first degree. Douglas Weston. Gerald Ashby. Patricia Morse. Attempted murder. Maya Weston Park. Attempted murder. Nora Callahan-Weston. Gasps moved through the room in waves. Someone near the back dropped a glass. Someone else reached for the arm of the person beside them. The string quartet stopped playing one instrument at a time until the last note dissolved into absolute silence. Renata's composure reassembled itself in real time, the mask sliding back into place even as the walls fell. This is a fabrication. Her voice was ice. Precise. The voice of a woman who had controlled rooms her entire life and had not yet understood that this one was beyond her. This woman has been trying to destroy my family since the day she married my son. You're going to ruin your career over the paranoid delusions of a woman who has never belonged here. We have the toxicology from Thanksgiving, Mrs. Weston. Nora stepped forward. We have exhumation reports from 3 graves. We have a witness who watched you in your kitchen in November of 1989. We have a container from 2020 with your fingerprints on the cap. And we have 34 years of documented pattern. She paused. All of it. Something cracked. Do you know what I built? Renata's voice rose, the mask coming apart in pieces, the way ice fractures. Do you know what I sacrificed for this family? Well, I gave up. You walked in here from nothing. You, with your government salary and your background, and you're complete. Take her. The handcuffs closed, and Nora Weston screamed. The sound that came out of her was not the sound of a wronged woman. It was the sound of someone who had built their entire world on the certainty that consequence was something that happened to other people. Encountering, for the first time in 63 years, the immovable fact that it wasn't. They let her through the door while she was still screaming, still threatening, still certain that her money and her name would make this stop the way they had always made everything stop. They wouldn't. The fairy lights kept twinkling. The snow kept falling. And Nora stood in the middle of the ballroom as the room emptied around her and felt, for the first time since that Thanksgiving table, something that was not fear. Not triumph, either. Just finished. Just done. The trial lasted 19 days. Celia Marchand flew up from Florida and testified for 3 hours. 81 years old. Reading glasses on a silver chain. Voice clear and absolute. The defense tried everything. Her age, her memory, the decades between then and now. She didn't move an inch. I've had 34 years to remember every detail, she said. When something changes your life entirely, you don't forget it. You carry it. I have carried this every single day. Maya testified about the pregnancy she lost, about the smoothies, about 4 years of knowing the truth and being too afraid to name it. She took something from me I can't replace, Maya said, her voice steady in the way of someone who has decided that shaking is not something she will do in this room. I'm not here because I'm angry. I'm here because the truth matters, and because the next woman deserves better than silence. Warrenton testified about chemistry for 2 full days, patient, methodical, airtight, and Nora testified for a day. The defense painted her as a woman with a vendetta, a federal agent who had manufactured a case from personal grievance, a pregnant woman whose judgment had been clouded by stress and emotion. She answered every question with evidence. Not anger, not emotion, evidence. "I don't ask juries to believe me," she said, on the last question of the last hour. "I show them what's true and let them decide. That's the job. That's always been the job." The jury deliberated for 4 days. Nora's daughter was born on day 2. 6 pounds, 9 ounces. Dark hair. Gray eyes the nurses said might change. Perfect. She named her Celia. When the verdict came, guilty, all counts, she was sitting in a hospital bed with her daughter against her chest, a phone held carefully to her ear so she wouldn't wake the sleeping baby. She didn't cry. She had been done crying for things she had no hand in breaking. She called Priya. She called Maya. She called the real Celia Marchand, who picked up on the first ring and said, before Nora could speak, "Already know. I've been watching the news." A pause. "I slept last night, Nora. For the first time in a very long time, I slept." Renata Weston received 3 consecutive life sentences. She walked out of the courtroom with her chin level and her face composed, which was, Nora thought, the most honest thing she had ever revealed, a complete and genuine inability to understand that what she had done was wrong. The estate sold in June. The foundation was restructured under independent oversight. Callum moved to Seattle in May. He called every Sunday morning to video chat with Celia, who at 3 months old had strong opinions about faces on screens and expressed them loudly. He was in therapy. He was doing the slow and necessary work of understanding what his childhood had actually been, what was real, and what had been constructed to serve someone else's needs. He and Nora were not together. They were something more complicated and more honest than together. 2 people trying to be good parents on the other side of devastation. Some days that was enough. Some days it was more than she'd expected. She was learning to live inside complicated. November again. 11 months later. Nora's apartment was on the 4th floor in the Arts District of Briarfield. 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, a window seat where she drank her coffee every morning and watched the city go from dark to light. She had chosen every piece of furniture herself. Every photograph on the walls was hers. Every book on the shelf. The small kitchen garden on the balcony. Mostly herbs because she had discovered that growing things slowly and carefully was unexpectedly good for a mind that had spent too many years operating in crisis mode. Celia's room was painted sage green. Her mother had helped choose it over a video call from Dayton. "Something that feels like growing," she'd said, and Nora had known immediately she was right. Thanksgiving again. The table was second-hand oak, refinished by her own hands over 2 weekends in September. It seated 10 comfortably. Tonight it held Priya and her husband, Tom, Maya, and the man she'd been quietly seeing for 5 months who looked at her like someone worth looking at. Warren Chun, who had become, improbably, a genuine friend. Director Okafor and his wife. Celia Marchand, who had flown up from Florida and was staying through New Year's and had already rearranged Nora's spice rack twice. And baby Celia, 13 months old, in a high chair, covered in mashed potato from wrist to shoulder and profoundly, philosophically satisfied with this outcome. The gravy was store-bought. No one mentioned it. No one needed to. Nora stood at the head of the table. The candles she'd bought at the farmer's market cast warm, uneven light across the faces she'd spent the last year surviving with. The windows behind her showed the city spread in amber and silver below. Inside, the room smelled of roasted turkey and something warm and green from the kitchen garden. It smelled like something she had built. "Before we eat," she said. The table went quiet. Celia threw a piece of bread roll onto the floor and looked extremely pleased. "A year ago, I sat at a different table, and I thought I understood what family was, obligation, performance, the careful management of people who would never fully accept you." She looked at the faces around her, at Maya, at Priya, at the 81-year-old woman who had kept a secret for 34 years because nobody strong enough had come to receive it yet. "I was wrong about what family is." She raised her glass. "Family is the people who believe you when it costs them something, who stay when staying is inconvenient, who see who you actually are and don't ask you to be less of it. She paused. I'm grateful for every single person at this table, for what we survived, and for this little girl who made me brave enough to fight when I wanted to give up. Glasses rose around the table. Seconde chance. Celia flung the rest of her potatoes. Laughter filled the room. Real laughter, the kind that comes from deep inside, the kind Nora had spent a year wondering if she would ever feel again. It turned out the answer was yes. It just needed the right table. Later, dishes done, guests gone, the apartment quiet and warm. Celia asleep in the sage green room. Nora stood at the kitchen window. The city spread below her, ordinary and ongoing, 10,000 lives in motion. No idea what the woman on the fourth floor had spent the last year doing, who she had fought, what it had cost, what had come out the other side. She thought about the woman she had been the Thanksgiving before, the woman who had learned to make herself smaller, who had told herself that belonging to a family that didn't want her was the price of love, who had carried 12 years of training and instinct and certainty into a dining room and almost talked herself out of trusting it. She had almost done that. She had almost let someone else's certainty replace her own. The baby monitor crackled softly. A small movement, a dreaming sound. Nora walked to the nursery doorway and stood in the dark. You're going to know your worth from the very beginning, she thought. You're going to trust what you know. You're not going to let anyone in the world make you question something your whole body is telling you is true. She touched the doorframe. And if anyone ever tries to hurt you, she started to think, tell me. But that wasn't right. You're going to fight, she thought. You already know how. You learned it before you were born. She turned off the hall light. Tomorrow there was work. Cases waiting. Women who had been told they were imagining things. Patterns no one else was looking for. Someone had to look. She had always been good at that. And now, finally, she had a table worth coming home to. If this story stayed with you, if there was a moment that stopped your breath or a line that hit somewhere you weren't expecting, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you felt. Tell me what it made you think about. And if you know someone who has ever been told that what they know is wrong, that their instincts can't be trusted, that they're being paranoid, that they're imagining things, share this with them. Because sometimes the most important thing a person can hear is simply, you weren't wrong. You were just surrounded by the wrong people. Subscribe to Orevan Stories. Every week, we bring you people who faced something they shouldn't have had to face and found out exactly who they were on the other side. We'll see you in the next one.